Yes, hello, this is Connor with luxnaturaaudio, and today I'm going to be summing some stems down through an old TASCAM mixing board. It's the M-06 stereo, which is the stereo version of the M-06, which I also have in the studio here, and essentially it gives you some nice analog warmth, some EQing, and some distortion if you really drive the channels. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run each instrument grouping down through this little board and sync it back up in kind of an old school way using sine waves. So if that's interesting to you, like this video, leave a comment below. How would you sync up these sort of stems? And as always, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification. But without further ado, let's go check out the project. Alright, you can see we're in Logic now. I have my session pulled up with some drums, bass, guitars, synths, Aux Percussion, and some vocals. And effectively what we're going to do is sum each of these instrument groupings down through this TASCAM one at a time so that we can get the coloration and some EQing and some distortion, possibly. If these drums sound familiar, it's because they're from a previous video where I summed VST Logic drums down through the Big 6 and through my Carvin mixer to get some additional color and reverb. And effectively I'm going to be doing that same process today just with these other instrument groupings. So first, let's just listen to the track and see what it sounds like. So it's just a kind of ambient, psych rock, dreamy track that I make frequently with my band Phase Materia, which you can check us out in the description below as well. But that is all dry processing with no TASCAM at all. So I already mixed this track a little bit in a kind of minimalistic style, just because this is how I would be receiving stems if I was processing this for a client project or something like that. So everything that needs to be in each stereo grouping is there and baked in and will run through the TASCAM. So we have a lot of EV2 processing on just about every channel. We have some Arturia 1176 compression. We have some J37 here and there, and some springs from Audio Thing, as well as the decapitator, just kind of hanging out on various channels in the project. And those are some of my favorite plugins. They're kind of like my everyday plugins, my Swiss Army knives. So those are throughout the track, but really not too over-processed because we want to leave room for the TASCAM as usual. So first we're going to process the bass just because we have the drums already, and that's the next logical place to start. So I'm going to let it loop and then just kind of make adjustments on the TASCAM until we like what we're hearing. Alright, so that sounds pretty good. I'm going to add a little top end, some slight low end, and then try to drive this channel for as much breakup or saturation as I can get. And I'm going to balance it with this master fader just so it doesn't go crazy and clip my digital inputs. So the first step here is to bring your playhead back behind your sine wave marker and make sure your bass and your sine wave are both going to play through the outboard gear. And you have to leave this on non-low latency mode so you can bake in all of this processing. It also helps to sync everything up at the end. So let's track this bass and then move on to the next stem. One thing about analog is you always have to let it play to the end of the clip, and it's always good to be listening through just to make sure that there's no pops or weird artifacting going on. So next, let's move on to the guitar tracks. I'm going to set the mixer at this general starting point every time, just so we can treat each stem on its own as it needs to be. We'll just let it loop and make adjustments as we want. I think that sounds pretty good. Doesn't really need too much, maybe just a little top end, some low end to give it some analog warmth. And again, I'm trying to drive this channel so that it can distort as much as possible without being over the top. And we're just bringing things down on the master so none of the digital inputs clip. Now we'll track that with the sine wave marker. Again, letting it fade all the way out. Next up is the Casio synth. So just a little bit of flavor, again, little top, little bottom, driving the channel and compensating with the master. We pull the playhead back before the sine wave marker, make sure we're arming the right track, and hit record. I like that static, it almost sounds like a shaker or something. It's rhythmic, so why get rid of it if it helps the song? Now we'll do the aux percussion. So I really just want to get brightness out of that and kind of cut down on some low-end mud from the collection of all of those different layers. So let's make sure we get our sine wave, solo that, and hit record. Finally, we're going to do the vocals here, same process. adding a little top, just a ever so slight amount of low end, again maxing the channel and compensating with the master. So we solo our vocals, our sine wave marker, and we record in on the right channel and capture this. Alright, so now we've recorded all of our stems down here through the TASCAM, but as you can see, they are way off from where this sine wave actually started. So here's the sine wave, and then here are all the other markers that we need to line up. So effectively, all you have to do is grab all of those tracks and try to nudge them in place. And it looks pretty close, but when you really get magnified in here, you can see it's still off. So we have to match it at the frame by frame level. So basically, just keep nudging it as you go, and bring these frames in as close as they can possibly get. You're gonna have to basically max out your magnifying glass so you can really make sure that each of those steps of data is exactly matched. So what I like to do is try to get my playhead on that first step of information, and then take all my other tracks and just make sure they're lined up there. Then what you want to do is pull your playhead to the peak of one of these sine waves, and then just scroll down and make sure that everything, track by track, is in phase. So as long as you have those sine waves lined up, you should be good, because no one's going to notice a fraction of a frame difference, especially if you're going for an analog kind of sound. Alright, so now we have the TASCAM stems lined up using our sine waves. Let's listen to the digital mix and see how they compare. First, this is the digital mix. Now let's hear the TASCAM STEM mix. Finally, I'm going to jump between the two mixes and A/B them in real time. We're going to start with the digital mix first. And TASCAM. Back to digital. TASCAM. So I think that's a pretty significant difference in the end. It has more weight, it has more harmonic interest to it, but it also sort of separates out a little bit better, and I think that's because we're using this analog gear. When things are digital, there's limitless bits of information that can sound any which way, but when you push it through circuitry, it becomes something that organic beings like ourselves can interpret. So that's really cool. And if you have a mix or a master or just stems you'd like processed in a similar way, contact me at luxnaturaaudio@gmail.com and I'd be happy to work with you. But let me know in the comments which mix you liked better ultimately. Did you like the purely digital mix, or did you like this TASCAM processed sound? As always, like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification, and we'll see you next time.